All right, so the Orioles looking for a breakout game to snap a 5-game losing streak, win 1 game in this 4-game series. Let's head to Minute Maid Park now and welcome in Brittany Ghiroli of MLB.com. And Britt, as Gary and Buck were just talking on the postgame last night, whenever you go through these kind of slumps, everyone says, come on, you got to shake it up. Are the Orioles in position to shake it up?
Not really, Jim. Not unless they make a trade. And you kind of saw with Alejandro De Aza, they were forced to designate him for assignment, ended up trading him to Boston, which they finalized yesterday. But there are moves that they can't make because so many guys have out of options. David Lowe, Travis Snyder, guys who potentially aren't living up to their billing. Maybe they would prefer to have a Nolan Reimold or Chris Parmelee down in AAA Norfolk to shake things up. They can't let Lowe or Snyder go without exposing them to waivers. Both of those guys under team control for next year. So there's a lot of inflexibility in this roster, which we've talked about before. You knew going into the season they needed to perform with the group that they had because there's not a whole lot of other options unless Dan Duquette goes outside of this organization and makes some trades. I don't see a whole lot of shaking things up. You look at today's lineup against a really tough lefty, Dallas Keuchel. They've got 3 lefties in that lineup. Now that's something that Buck shouldn't have to do. It's something he doesn't want to do, but they don't have any other options, particularly with shortstop J.J. Hardy being hurt, them missing Matt Wieters, and of course you can make a case the biggest guy of all, second baseman Jonathan Scope, is forcing multiple guys to really play out of position here.
All right, now we know roster moves are imminent simply because there are injured players about to return. The first will be Matt Wieters. If all goes well, as Buck likes to remind us, that'll be tomorrow night in Cleveland. But what about some of the other moves that you alluded to, possibly to tweak the roster? Does Dan Duquette make a trade? We usually hear about June 15th. You know who you have, and if you have a deficiency, you go make a trade. Or are there players on that AAA roster that might be better replacements for the players who are underachieving here?
Well, there certainly could be players down below who could help this club, but I think the Orioles right now are looking for 2 things. They're looking for a right-handed outfielder who can hit, which, you know, they do have some guys who could fit that bill. They're also looking for an 8th-inning reliever, which is a little bit less magnified here because this offense has been doing so poorly, but those are things they're going to look to get as this trade deadline nears closer. Those are things that scouts and other organizations are looking at, seeing if the Orioles could be a potential swap for them. Now, in terms of roster moves, they've got Brian Mattis' suspension, which could be up to 8 games hanging over their heads. So Cleveland is going to involve a whole lot of things besides Matt Wieters being activated. That looks like it'll probably be Steve Clevenger, but Bud Norris is traveling with him to Cleveland. What happens with Mike Wright? Who starts Sunday's game? I mean, there's a whole lot of moving parts here. They could put Mike Wright in that bullpen, give Bud Norris a start on Sunday. Again, it depends. Are they down a reliever because of Brian Mattis? There's just so much going on. We talked about this yesterday with Buck. He said he can't live in a world beyond today because there's simply so many moving parts with this team, and this might be a year that things never settle down for them roster-wise. You look at last year, things never seemed to settle down for them. They always had injuries. They were always covering, but they had guys step up. So far, they haven't had guys step up, and that's really what this team needs.
And you mentioned J.J. Hardy, whose right-handed bat certainly would be something in the lineup that they would prefer today, but he's not starting for a 4th consecutive game. What's the latest on J.J., and how long can they go playing a man short if he can't get in the lineup?
Well, they can't go much longer, Jim. And we spoke with J.J. earlier today. He was out here. He took some swings. He tested his oblique. He still feels a little something right at the end of his swing. So he feels like tomorrow in Cleveland would be the perfect spot to get back in there. He knows he's hamstrung this team. They can't afford to keep playing short. If he doesn't get into these games in Cleveland, it's going to be a disabled list situation. He still thinks he can avoid the DL. He's continuing to get better. That MRI, of course, on the oblique didn't show anything structurally wrong with it. So the Orioles feel okay about it as well. And I think everybody knows that the way this team is going, the last thing they need is to lose J.J. Hardy for a month of the season or potentially longer because obliques are such a pesky injury to have.
All right, Britt, appreciate the update. That's Brittany Ghiroli. Follow her coverage of the Orioles at Orioles.com.